Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, your home for Pittsburgh Penguins news and analysis. You can find us on YouTube at Tip of the Ice-Burgh, or you can check us out anywhere you get your podcast from. I'm your host, Nick Belsky, joined as always by Nick Horwat, and we got a great show for you guys today. We're recapping a very, very busy weekend for the Pittsburgh Penguins, discussing who else could be on the trade block as the deadline is closing in just 4 weeks away. And then we will dive deeper into the impact of the Pens' biggest acquisition of the weekend. Let's get started on the Tip of the Ice-Burgh. And we're kicking things off with a little bit of news and notes because it was a newsy weekend for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Only one game played, a shutout victory over the Nashville Predators. So all's good on the ice, but there's a lot of things happening off the ice that we want to get into. Let's start with this. According to Swedish outlet Aftonbladet, and a hat tip to Taylor Haas of DK Pittsburgh Sports, who was the first to report it in Pittsburgh, Rickard Rakell is heading to the Four Nations faceoff, replacing William Karlsson of the Vegas Golden Knights for Team Sweden. That makes now 3 Penguins: Crosby, Karlsson, and Rakell, all members of Four Nations teams, getting a little bit of extra hockey here in February. Horwat, your thoughts on Rakell heading to Four Nations and Team Sweden?
Well, it feels like it was a long awaited choice, doesn't it? I mean, a lot of people, when the initial rosters came out, were wondering where Rakell was in the first place. Well, Team Sweden's a pretty deep team, especially on forward. And just despite how good of a season Rakell was having, I think it made sense that he wasn't on it at first, but this was the perfect position for him to be in, just as injury replacement if he wanted to go. There's all that discussion to have now with guys that may be banged up, maybe don't want to go risk a further injury or risk anything at the tournament and would much rather save themselves for the NHL's regular season. But for what it's worth, with 23 goals in 53 games this season, Rickard Rakell, it's still a deserving honor to be in the conversation and now on the team and ready to compete for Team Sweden, who entering the tournament, before the injuries piled up, at least could have been a sleeper choice. We'll see where the goaltending takes them, but for now, it's going to be a tight event no matter what. All 4 teams are, usually the top 4 picks anyone would have for a gold medal in any random tournament you pick in hockey.
Yeah.
So it should be a tight tournament. Rickard Rakell being involved in it, say, good little boost for him, good little boost for the Penguins in general, just to have another player there. And we'll see what happens. It's going to be a fun tournament, I think, regardless of A, who shows up, or B, how many people are watching. It should be entertaining for hockey fans, and it's the first step back, albeit a small one, into international play for the NHL.
Yeah. No, you mentioned Rakell and it being deserving. He was already having a really good season, but exactly 3 months ago today, the initial rosters were announced. Rickard Rakell was, as far as everybody in Pittsburgh was concerned, the biggest snub of the entire Four Nations roster reveal, all 4 countries, all 4 teams. And since then, all he's done is a measly 29 points in 26 games. So he was already having a great year. He kicked it up another notch whenever that snub happened. And now, of course, he gets the reward for it. He's on the team, and I think we all expect him to go because he had been outspoken about wanting to be on that team. And once he was snubbed, saying, hey, I'm just going to play every game to prove that they made the wrong choice. Well, they made the right choice. It just took him a little bit of time. So congratulations to Rickard Rakell. Excited to see him participating alongside Erik Karlsson, who was named assistant captain of Team Sweden late last week. Let's talk a little bit about Evgeni Malkin, because he's clearly not heading to Four Nations because nobody from Russia is. That's a discussion for another podcast. But as far as his injury status is concerned, he skated before practice yesterday, but according to Mike Sullivan, his status has not changed. Malkin was labeled week to week last Monday due to a lower body injury sustained against the Seattle Kraken whenever he collided with Chandler Stevenson. Let's just say this. It's likely now, not that we were expecting anything different, but it's likely now that he is out until after the Four Nations face-off tournament, which means there's still 2.5 weeks until Evgeni Malkin could play another hockey game, which would make it a full month off for the 38-year-old center. So the question that I have for you, Horwat, is do you expect him to make a return for that first game back, which is against the Washington Capitals in 2.5 weeks? And what do you expect him to look like after a full calendar month on the shelf?
I think I would expect him back at that point because he is already skating. He is already kind of making those positive strides. I don't know what I would expect, though, coming out of that, considering he's older, definitely getting aged, definitely wasn't having a particularly notable season heading into the injury. Now he's going to have the month off. Maybe there's a bit of the rejuvenation process that could happen he's already skating. Maybe he's literally just sitting out on a beach for 2 weeks. Maybe he's fully healthy and recovered for 2 weeks and is just getting up to speed over that time, which could be a bonus for the Penguins. But I think at the end of the day, overall, I don't expect too much upon return just because the trend has been not too much this season. However, I'd love to be proven wrong. I just think for the moment, keep the expectations low. He'll likely return at that first game back, but wouldn't expect a total bounce back to some previous norms.
Yeah, for a guy like Malkin, he was probably looking forward to the Four Nations break as kind of like a get your legs back underneath you type of couple of weeks. Problem is, when one of your legs is the injury, it's going to make it harder for you to just kind of rejuvenate your lower body. So I do think it's going to be kind of a slow start for Evgeni Malkin. Whenever he does return, I expect it to be that first game back because when this injury initially occurred, even before Mike Sullivan came out and said it's week to week with a lower body injury, Rob Rossi reported in The Athletic that he was going to be out for, quote, a few weeks, which to me sounds closer to 1 to 2 than it does 4 to 5. So I would imagine that he gets back, especially with the fact that he's already skating, especially even if it's before practice, he's already skating. I would imagine he gets back for that first game against the Washington Capitals. That and, Evgeni Malkin doesn't like to miss matchups with Alex Ovechkin, but I do think that the time off is going to create a little bit of rust, time of which the Penguins don't really have much of, right? I mean, he comes back. For those that want to see the Penguins try to make a push here, they're going to need Evgeni Malkin to be at his best. I just feel like it's going to take 1, maybe 2 weeks to get him back to full strength, whatever that is, post a knee injury at this stage of the season.
Yeah, it'll take some time. Regardless of sitting out or playing against, it's going to take some time for him to completely get his legs back. It is just a positive look that he's already out there skating, regardless of before practice, white jersey, whatever the situation may be. Him skating at all is big, especially considering it is a literal leg injury. Those are just the little things that you notice that you look for, and positive strides are being made. We'll just see him back when he comes back, and for what it's worth, this Penguins season is, I'm sure we'll discuss it at some point, just it is what you make of it. It's essentially, the for sale sign is up, and it's all kicking off. It kicked off with Lars Eller, and then it was a long break, but Drew O'Connor, Marcus Pettersson out the door adds this to the scent of the sale is on, the season is not over, but you could chalk it up as they are in sell mode.
Now, I was asked this question last week, and I'm interested to get your reaction to it. Somebody asked me, do you want to see the Penguins win, or would you rather see the Penguins tank? Like, what side of this are you on? And my response was, listen, as somebody who sits behind a microphone and talks about this team 4 days a week, I watch every game. I watch and keep along with every practice. I would much rather do that when watching good hockey and winning hockey. So whether or not it's best for the team in the long run, I'm somebody that wants to sit there and wants to see Sidney Crosby succeed. I'm somebody that wants to sit there and wants to see the emblem, the Pittsburgh Penguins, succeed. So I'm someone that says, yeah, it might be better in the long run if they go, 2 and 20, whatever, to finish the season and get the first overall pick and end up bringing in one of those top 4 studs that are in the draft. But at the same time, as somebody who's going to sit down and watch these next 28 games, I'd rather watch good hockey, and I'd rather talk about good hockey.
Yeah, I'm indifferent, I think. And it's tough to really say that because you're right. I do want to see the Penguins win. I do want to see Sidney Crosby succeed. I do want to see this team do well. At the same time, I also think in realistics of this team just isn't going to do a lot of those things. They might surprise me. But thinking realistically and maybe even a little cynically, I could see and maybe even want to see the losing a little more because maybe that gets the ball rolling on a lot more, interesting conversation in terms of, well, who's going to be the next to be traded? Who could they go out and get to revamp it for next season? Mm-hmm. How will the front office and the ownership group and the team react to a 2-and-whatever finish? That's highly unlikely, but you get where we're all coming from here. How would those players react to a very poor finish? Maybe they finish last in the Metro. Maybe they finish in the top with a top 5 draft pick, and who knows where the Rangers finish, and then we'll discuss it. And then they have a second first-round pick. This year's draft is not as good as last year's or even next year's, I think. So losing this year hurts a bit more than, say, losing next. But if you're losing this year, you want to win next year. The Penguins are in a weird situation again. But overall, I think it's at the end of the day. I'd like to see them win, of course, but my bet is they're going to just lose a ton.
Yeah.
And the cynic in me almost wants to see it.
Yeah, and there's going to be people that are going to say, oh, how dare you think that it's better for... It's not. You can believe that it is certainly better for the Penguins to lose and get a better draft position while also wanting to still see them win. Like, I know it's better for them if they lose, but I'd rather watch them win hockey games. It's kind of a win-win. Whenever you place a bet against your team, you're like, hey, if they lose, I'm going to be sad, but I'm going to have money. If they win, I'm going to be happy. I'll be out a little bit of change, but I'll be happy because they won. That's essentially where I'm at with the Pittsburgh Penguins this year. But you mentioned, if that happens, the conversations of who's going to get traded will begin to heat up, and that's what I want to talk about right now. The Penguins' 2 biggest pieces all season long for the trade conversations: Marcus Pettersson, Drew O'Connor. On Friday night, they both were shipped out of Pittsburgh on the same damn trade call. Horwat, we did an over-under a few weeks back where I said, do you think there's going to be over or under 2.5 players on the NHL roster that are traded away before the deadline? You said over, and this is around when the quote-unquote fire sale reports were starting to circulate. You said over. I said under. I'm a little worried right now because we're already at 2 and we have 4 weeks left until the NHL trade deadline. You're sitting pretty right now. I'm sure you're feeling pretty good about that prediction a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, and not only is it already at 2, it doesn't seem like Kyle Dubas is done. That's almost for certain. A lot of teams were just looking at the 4 Nations face-off, which is next week now, as I was looking at the calendar here. Oh boy, was that fast.
Yeah.
As a soft trade deadline. So there may even be a couple of more trades, not necessarily from the Penguins, but around the league this week at some point. And who knows, maybe the Penguins end up getting involved in something because the sale doesn't seem to be over. I mean, those were the top 2 pieces. I'm sure Kyle Dubas is still working on, or at least getting in touch with people to see if there is any kind of market out there for a guy like Ryan Graves, maybe even Tristan Jarry, even though he's in the AHL, seeing what the market is out there, because it sounds like really outside of the Crosbys, the Malkins, that's about it. Anyone can be had for their price. Yeah. That includes guys like Carlson, that includes guys like Letang, at least according to Josh Yeo of The Athletic recently saying that, they may not be moved, but anyone can be had at the right price.
Yeah.
So pretty much this team is up for grabs outside of the 2, no doubts, Hall of Fame forwards. We'll see where things go from there. Also, Rakell might be sticking around just for the sake of his value is going to go way up in the summer. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'd say there's definitely more moves on the horizon. Just, I don't know who yet, though. Is the real, could they flip Danton Heinen immediately? Tough to say. Does Anthony Beauvillier see another team in the matter of 3 seasons? It's possible. Does someone want to take Noel Acciari? I'm just looking at the roster, and it's a lot of, movable. Are they, though?
Movable, but are they desirable? I think that is a lot of the question marks with what's remaining on the Penguins roster, because the players that are desirable are likely not movable, because let's not forget, when Kyle Dubas spoke to the media over the weekend, and you can check out his full press conference on the Pittsburgh Penguins website, he said, as of right now, I haven't had a discussion with anybody about waiving their no trade clause or modified no trade clause or anything like that. And from the sounds of it, I don't think he really feels like he's going to. So he's going to work within the constructs of what those contracts say. And because of that, it changes kind of the perspective of how many players end up getting moved. Do I think there's going to be a lot of talks? Do I think there's going to be a lot of names floated around over the next 4 weeks? Yeah, but I'm not necessarily sure there's going to be a lot of actual movement from the Pittsburgh Penguins simply because of what we're talking about here. Are they available versus are they desirable? And with that, I made a list here of my top 3 trade pieces most likely to get traded from the Pittsburgh Penguins. I also have 2 honorable mentions at the end. And I wanted to get your reaction to this first, Horwat, before I put it in the story for, breakaway on SI. Number 1 is a name that you just mentioned, Anthony Beauvillier. He's having a good year. He's on an expiring deal. He's shown in the past that he can succeed when traded midseason. Not last year, but if you look at the year before, when he was traded from the New York Islanders to the Vancouver Canucks, he played very well down the stretch for the Vancouver Canucks. And I think a lot of GMs are going to look at that. Not to mention the fact that they kind of replaced Beauvillier on Friday. Anthony Beauvillier has been a roster floater for the Pittsburgh Penguins. He's played the left, he's played the right, he's played bottom line, he's played third line, he's played up with Sidney Crosby. And honestly, he has been the preferred choice to play with Sidney Crosby when one of those top guys goes down or one of those top guys needs to be moved out of that position. It's been Anthony Beauvillier. I think they got a roster floater in Danton Heinen that can do just that for the remainder of the season. Yeah, are they slightly different players? Of course. But Danton Heinen was in that position when he was in Pittsburgh previously. So because of that, I think Anthony Beauvillier is the most likely to be moved on the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's a good choice, especially for the sake of expiring deal, probably available, and probably one of the more desirable pieces on this lineup. Because again, there are definitely players, available who wants them. Beauvillier is one that could be wanted.
Now, here's where I ran into trouble. And yes, I ran into trouble after the top spot, because Nola Chari is not going to be on this list. Desirable, not very much. Matt Nieto is not going to be on this list. Desirable, not very much. Jesse Puljujarvi, on the other hand, I think there's a lot of question marks about what Jesse Puljujarvi has left in the tank. He's pretty good when he plays. Yeah, does he make some defensive lapses from time to time? 100%. Does that go a lot further in Pittsburgh into getting him off the ice than it would for a lot of other franchises? Yes. Mike Sullivan punishes that type of play more than a lot of coaches in the National Hockey League. So a lot of coaches are going to look at that and say, we would have kept him in. We would have still given him more ice time. He'll fit more in here. Not only that, he's a big name. He's a low price. And once again, he's on an expiring contract. The Penguins took a swing on him last year when he was coming off that double hip resurfacing surgery, where everybody had the question, what is he going to look like after that type of surgery and that much time off? Well, it took him a little while, but I think he's looked very good when he's been given the opportunities this year. And I think other general managers are going to take notice of that and say, hey, do we need a really good 12th or 13th forward that could come into the bottom 6, play physically, and give us a little bit of offense? Jesse Puljujarvi's that guy, and I don't think necessarily it's going to be too expensive, but it is a piece that the Penguins could look to trade for maybe a mid-round pick here or there.
Yeah, get a mid-round pick for him. I like this choice too. I just think he's not getting his opportunities in Pittsburgh, and the guy deserves the opportunities anywhere he can get them.
Yeah,
26 years old, is coming off those surgeries, but at this point, I felt last year at least, he had what it took to be an NHL regular again.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to see this go down as, people look back on the players that are getting these surgeries, and they look at the Patrick Kane's was able to come back. Forget who else was able to come back successfully. But then they're going to get to the Jesse Puljujarvi and go, didn't work out for him. I think it can. I think that's just again, I don't even want to say it's a Mike Sullivan problem or it's a Penguins problem, but it's just something about this system, this team, and this lineup that he's just not going to make way. And it's a matter of him finding a team that he can play for, play regularly, and prove that he can be, not at the Patrick Kane level, but can be among the success stories for this surgery. And he's just being held back in Pittsburgh right now. he deserves the chance to prove himself, and a mid-round pick for that's not bad.
Mm-hmm. Now at number 3, there's going to be a name that a lot of people are not going to like me saying, but some people will agree with me saying. Michael Bunting, 20-plus goal scorer. He's under a good contract with the salary cap going up next year. I think a lot of teams that are looking to add a good middle six piece for a playoff run are going to look at him and say, man, not only do we get him for a playoff run, he's been really good on the power play. He's been really good kind of just all around for the Pittsburgh Penguins since they acquired him from Carolina. But he's under contract another year at a very nice $4 million cap hit. I think that's going to be very attractive for a lot of teams, not to mention of the top 6 guys, he's the most movable, right? The Penguins aren't going to trade Rickard Rakell. They're not going to trade Brian Rust for the sake of Sidney Crosby. If they fall further back in the wild card race, who's to say they don't try to trade Michael Bunting and continue to grow and expand that trade tree that Jake Gensel started last year? I think that that's a name that becomes very interesting. Now, of course, it screws Evgeni Malkin the rest of the year because as of right now in this entire season, they've been operating with 5 top 6 forwards. You get rid of Michael Bunting, you will now be operating with 4 top 6 forwards, and we know who's not going to be surrounded, right? We know it's going to be Rakell, Crosby, and Rust on the top line, and they're going to look at Malkin and say, here's the kids, make it work. And it kind of sucks that way. But with where the Penguins are at right now, with the plan that has been set forth since last year when Michael Bunting came into the organization, I think it makes sense that his name, at the very least, is going to be talked about in NHL circles over the next 4 weeks.
Yeah, he'll definitely be talked about. I think in my head, he definitely falls in the same category as Rickard Rakell almost. In the Penguins probably don't want to move him this season on the off chance they go on a run. He could be a useful piece for that run. Whereas if the wheels do fall off at the end of the year, or I should say before the trade deadline, that's a movable piece right away. You find a team, find a taker who wants good scoring in their top 6 for a pretty reasonable price. But once the offseason rolls around, that $4 million all of a sudden looks like chump change. Get it out. Same goes for Rakell at his 5. So in my eyes, they fall into the same category of just see what the team is at come the first week of March and play from there. And as for who would be playing with Evgeni Malkin, I mean, at that point, screw it. Play whoever with anyone, even if it means moving Russ down to play with Evgeni Malkin because Rakell is still here. Sid still has one. Malkin gets the other. And I mean, come on, it's something the Penguins have done forever. We watched Dom Simone play next to Crosby for a long time.
Yeah.
We know how this lineup can do.
Yeah, we did. What I would say is if this is the case and this ends up happening, 1, you're certainly not expecting to go on a run towards the end of the season. But 2, you need somebody to fill that spot. There is somebody who is right now one of the best rookies in the American Hockey League. Give Ville Koivunen a chance. Mm-hmm. Koivunen, Tomasino, and Malkin. I'm not sure how that line would work, but you're certainly going to get some answers for next year and further beyond. So, again, that's just my personal thought. That might be a pipe dream of seeing somebody like Koivunen get second line minutes next to Sidney Crosby as early as second line minutes next to Malkin as early as this season. But as far as the original conversation, Michael Bunting to me is number 3. And again, that's because you look around, the only one of these players that I would give more than a 50% chance of moving is Anthony Beauvillier. Mm-hmm. Like, that's the thing is these other players, I'm like, okay, probably 30-70 Michael Bunting, 30% he goes, 70% he stays. Probably closer to like 40-60 for Jesse Puljujarvi. Beauvillier is the only guy that I'm sitting there saying, yeah, that makes a lot of sense that he would be gone by March 7th. So that's my top 3. Michael Bunting at number 3, Jesse Puljujarvi at number 2, and the most likely to be traded by the Penguins is Anthony Beauvillier. I do have 2 honorable mentions. Alex Nedeljkovic, who has a stock rising, but at the same time, that factory reset of Tristan Jarry, you're going to want that to be a little bit longer. So I think that that's an honorable mention because people are going to be interested. I don't know if the Penguins are in a position to trade away a goaltender at this moment. And Matt Grzelcyk, because of a similar situation, his stock is high, probably the highest it's going to be. But look at the left side. You traded away Marcus Pettersson. You now have, if you get rid of Grzelcyk, Joseph Pickering, who is at the AHL All-Star game currently, Ryan Graves, and Ryan Shea. Oof. Like, if that doesn't scream, I don't want to say tank, but if that doesn't scream, hey, we've kind of passed the torch on this season and said, let's experiment. That's what that says to me if you trade away Matt Grzelcyk, somebody who's been very good on the power play for them. And not only that, somebody who has gotten the best out of himself in a pairing with Erik Karlsson this year, something that can't be said for everybody else that would be remaining.
Yeah, I was going to ask about Matt Grzelcyk, just looking at the numbers. I mean, whenever I first saw them, or at least looked at them today, I thought, could that be just a side effect of playing next to Karlsson for so long? Which is possible. I mean, we kind of saw those numbers rise for Marcus Pettersson last year.
Yeah.
Paired with them, the numbers just by association took a small increase. But it seems genuinely like Matt Grzelcyk is exceeding expectations in terms of the offensive production. He had quite a few assists. I believe was leading the defensive scoring on the team for a little while. Has since been passed by Erik Karlsson, rightfully so. But the stock is not going to get any higher. That's a good player to. Again, you only signed him for a 1-year deal. You only signed him for the 1 year of, let's see what you can do, rebuild something for yourself here. He's already doing it. Maybe you pass him off to a cup contender who could use that. Maybe even you retain a little cash on it just because it's the year anyway. But yeah, I'd say that's a reasonable name to also consider. Like I said, I thought maybe it could be Karlsson side effects. Doesn't seem too much like that.
No, he's a power play point merchant. I mean, he's played well at 5-on-5. I think his defensive game has come a long way from where it was in the first 2 months of the season. But points-wise, he is a power play merchant. And some teams are going to value that very highly, especially whenever you look at them saying, all right, well, we just need somebody to move the puck on the bottom pairing. Matt Grzelcyk, especially if they retain Matt Grzelcyk at $1 million? I think he's at 2.5 or something like that. So like Matt Grzelcyk at like $1.75 million. That's a pretty good bargaining chip for the last 21 games of the season in a playoff run. So those are my honorable mentions. The only problem I have with those guys is like I mentioned, look at the Penguins situation right now on defense. I don't know if you can get rid of another defenseman right now on the left side. I just don't. Like Ryan Graves has been better this season, but I'm not putting him with Letang or Karlsson. I'm just not at this stage of the year. P.O. Joseph looked really good with Chris Letang and has played well with Letang in the past. We'll see if that continues. But again, a player that we said when he came back, hey, maybe they won't put him in a position that's a little bit too much. Maybe they won't put him on the first pairing. Well, now he's forced to be on the first pairing with Marcus Pettersson gone. And Owen Pickering, I would expect to be back up by the end of the season. I'm not quite sure where they put him, because do you put him with Letang, which it worked in the past, but then who do you put with Karlsson? Do you put him with Karlsson because that's a big ask of a 20-year-old defenseman? But I think there's a lot too many questions. And I think that since you have an answer right now with Grzelcyk and Karlsson, and since the Penguins are still a team that believe internally that they could maybe make a push here and make things interesting in the last month, I think that he's probably on the outside looking at any trade list that you're going to create. But top three, Beauvillier, Puljujarvi, Bunting. Honorable mentions, Nedeljkovic, Grzelcyk. Horwat, did I miss anybody before we move on?
No, that's it. That's all I got for now. We'll see how this week plays on. We'll see what comes from the dead zone of the Four Nations face-off, and then we'll have some real discussions post that.
All righty. Let's finish off this episode by discussing about, to me, and I think to everybody, the biggest acquisition they made over the weekend. Of that entire trade, 6 pieces, 2 move into Vancouver, 4 move into Pittsburgh. I think it's clear that the biggest piece was the first round pick that the Pittsburgh Penguins got, which is an protected pick from the New York Rangers, top 13 protected. Let's just say this, whether it's this year or next, it'll be the first time the Penguins have 2 first-round picks since 2012 when they took Derek Pouliot, 8th overall, and Olli Maatta, 22nd overall. Let's start with this, Horwat. Where do you think the Rangers finish this season, and what do you think that pick looks like, if it even looks like anything, in 2025?
See, this would have been a wild pick to pick up earlier in the season, even with the trade protection, because the Rangers were in such bad shape that you're looking at that first round pick of, it could be top 5, genuinely. Even if the Penguins weren't getting it, you're still looking at it as what happened to the Rangers. They've obviously started winning a bit. I think at this very moment, it's 12.
They are.
Maybe it's adjusted, but they're right on that edge of it might kick into next year. It might, it might be the Penguins to have it 14 even. The draft this year isn't super deep. I'd say the Rangers end up finishing in a decent enough spot that the Penguins keep it for this season, just because, of course, it's the Rangers. They might just put stuff together. Jonathan Quick is still stealing the show as a backup. Igor Shesterkin can figure it out. It needs to figure it out. And, I mean, yeah, they acquired JT Miller, and he's playing pretty well so far. Who knows how long that can all last for. But for the Rangers, I don't know if they'll make the playoffs, but I think that pick is going to be the Penguins this season. I think they'll have it at about 14 to 16-ish.
Yeah, I think there's a realistic chance they do make the playoffs simply because I think 2 of the 3 teams that are currently in the playoffs are not going to make it. Yeah. The question becomes, can the Rangers jump a team like the Bruins, who I think is going to make a strong push? Can they jump a team like the Lightning, who I think are going to make a strong push? I just don't see more than one of Detroit, Ottawa, and Columbus making the playoffs this year. If all 3, that'd be ridiculous. But I think when you look at those 3 teams that are out of it, the Rangers, the Bruins, the Lightning, teams that have been in these races down the stretch, teams that have been in playoff situations before, I feel like they're going to heat up no matter what. At least 2 of them, and at least 2 of those teams that have not been in that situation in a very, very long time are going to kind of fall under the pressure of the playoff push in March and April. So I feel like they're going to be able to make a push. I think we've seen over the past month that they've gotten better and better since that Jacob Trouba trade. They've been able to kind of catch their footing a little bit. There's still drama, but there's less drama, right? The drama mostly walked out the door. And since then, they've been able to be a little bit better. They went on that one stretch where they were 7-2-1 in a stretch of 10 games. They've kind of cooled off a little bit, but got a nice win after the Miller trade. I think this pick ends up between somewhere in the 17 to 20 range. I really do. And that's them making the playoffs. I do think that they are going to make a push, and I think that I would trust them to be between 17 to 20 when the day is all over. Now, the question is, and you've kind of alluded to it, would it be better for the Penguins to pick this year or for the Rangers to struggle and keep that pick and allow the Penguins to take that first in 2026?
I would think it'd be next year. At least so far, the reporting is that next season's draft is going to be better, or next year's draft will be deeper. We'll have the more sustainable first-round picks in it. It would be better for the Penguins to collect 2 for solid first-round picks for their future from next season. Again, even if the Rangers do, let's say, make it all the way and win the Cup next season. Again, far-fetched, but I'm kind of just spitballing here. Even having a 32nd pick for the Penguins, on top of wherever they end up picking for themselves, it still sounds a lot better than, at least with the deeper draft, they're selecting it. It sounds like it would be a lot better to have it next year. That's the long and the short of it. This Rangers team can do whatever it needs to for themselves with their pick this year, and it's going to be tough for the Penguins to nab that first round pick again, because this is an opportunity for them. This is an opportunity for them to collect 2 solid first round picks. The next year's one would be more substantial for them. That's what the Penguins should be hoping for, at least, is that the Rangers continue to lose and retain their first round pick this season, unless the Penguins scouting staff has their eyes on someone.
Well, I would imagine that they do, but here's the thing. I think regardless of where New York falls, and I'll have a little bit more for this later, but regardless of where they fall, it's better for the Penguins to get it in 2026. Just where they're at as a franchise, because they're not fully committed to a rebuild. They're not fully committed to tanking out the next couple of seasons to try to burn it to the ground and then build it back up. I mean, yes, I agree. It's fairly unanimous as far as everybody is concerned right now. The next year's draft is deeper, which means on the surface, you have a higher percentage chance of hitting on both of those picks because there's just a better crop of prospects to choose from than there is this year. It doesn't mean you can't hit on both in 2025. It just means you're more likely to hit on both if you pick in 2026. Not to mention, I don't think the Rangers will be as bad in 2026, which means it's going to be a deeper pick. And that's better whenever you have a better crop of prospects. But at the same time, there is a small chance, especially with the salary cap going up, that everything goes right for the Penguins. It all went right for the Rangers whenever they were trying their shotgun rebuild, and they jumped back out of nowhere. It all went right for the LA Kings, and they were ahead of schedule. If all goes right for the Penguins, they might have a chance to be a playoff team next year. And if they're a playoff team that feels they're one piece away, it's better to have 2 first-round picks where you only have to trade away one of them and still have your selection in that deep draft than to only have one and to trade it away and not pick in the first round as a team that is overarching, trying to rebuild for the future a little bit. So I do think that on 2 occasions and on 2 cases, it is better to have it in 2026. But at the same time, I'm not ruling out the fact that the Rangers could finish within the top 13 and still decide, you know what? We're going to pass that off. You can have this year's pick, and the Penguins would have 2 top 13 picks in the 2025 draft because the 2026 draft is better, and they may want that pick. They know they'll be better, and they may want that trade chip. So for the same reasons that it might be better for the Penguins to have that pick in 2026 are the same reasons, and I'm not saying it's likely, but the same reasons that the Rangers might look at it and say, we would rather still have our first in 2026 and give up this prospect in 2025.
All right, I forgot they could do that. But also,
most teams choose not to do that. Most teams say, hey, we're going to be better, so let's take the pick whenever it's 12th overall or 10th overall. The Penguins did it with the Erik Karlsson trade.
Yeah.
They ended up picking, if I'm not mistaken, they ended up picking Braden Yeager instead. No, never mind, because they almost finished top 10 and then didn't, so they just had to give it away anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. I forgot the Rangers could do that.
They could.
I mean, just a matter of why would they add the protection in the first place? Whatever. Who knows? It's a fascinating situation. At the end of the day, I think for every reason that you put, every reason that you said, the trade chip for the following season, the deeper draft for the following season, all of it just makes sense that for the Penguins, it would be better for them, more beneficial for them to have 2 first-round picks in 2026 rather than this upcoming summer.
Yeah. Now, there is probably the best case scenario of the Penguins. If you're looking at this from a rebuilding standpoint, the Penguins get a top 10, top 12 pick with their own pick, and the New York Rangers narrowly miss the playoffs and finish 15th or 14th. Then the Penguins would have 2 top 15 selections. Hora, do you remember the last time the Penguins had 2 selections within the top 15 of the NHL draft?
Well, it wasn't the Pouliot Mata one because I believe Mata was like 18.
Mata was 22.
That was so close. Dude, I can't remember the last time. Outside of that one, I can't remember the last time they picked twice in the first round period.
Well, the last time they picked twice in the first round period was the last time they overall picked twice in the top 15, and that was the 1984 NHL draft where they selected Mario Lemieux first overall and Doug Bodger 9th overall.
9.
And why is Doug Bodger important? A lot of people that weren't alive back then or didn't watch a lot of 90s hockey is going to say, who is Doug Bodger? So they botched a pick. Well, Doug Bodger did go on to play 1,000 NHL games as a defenseman. He was also notably traded for Tom Barrasso in 1989. I believe that was in 89 whenever they traded for Barrasso. From
88,
the
yes.
88, exactly. So yeah, the last time they were able to do that, their fortunes changed quite a bit. Mario Lemieux is not in the 2025 draft, nor is anybody ever close to Mario Lemieux going to be in any draft from this point until the end of time. That's just not going to happen. But I will say, if history repeats itself and they get a good pick and then a good pick in the top 15, it certainly helps the Penguins in their search to become the next iteration and their search to become the next generation of Pittsburgh Penguins successful hockey. So again, an interesting parallel to draw. Again, I'm not saying Mario Lemieux is in this draft. I'm not saying they're going to have a Lemieux-Bodger draft, but I am saying 2 top 15 picks can do a lot for a franchise.
Good. Even if you keep them, if you trade them, there's solid pieces there. There's always that draft pedigree that comes with players. Hence why you might be able to get something decent for Jesse Puljujarvi, former 4th overall pick. He still carries that pedigree a little bit.
Yep, people still talk about it when they're talking about Jesse Puljujärvi. That they just do. Everybody is obsessed with draft stock. But that's going to do it for this episode of The Tip of the Iceberg. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this one. Remember that if you like this video, make sure you like, share, subscribe on YouTube at Tip of the Iceberg, or you can check us out anywhere you get your podcasts from. We'll see you guys next time.